So good morning. My name is Martin. I am the founder and CEO of VetBooks. And today, super excited to present 5 reasons why inventory matters and what you can do about it with my friend Emmitt, who's the co-founder of Inventory Ally. And uh, just before we get started into the meat of it, um, let me start by sort of declaring my conflicts that I am an advisor. I'm an advisor to Inventory Ally, so I've got some interest in Inventory Ally success. And the reason that I'm excited about it is because we interface with a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things in our space. And in the inventory space, Emmitt and his team um, are thinking about things, I think, in a pretty unique way. And while today is not intended to be commercial, um, we will sort of tap into Emmett's experience and skills. And we're going to try and keep this to a tight 50 minutes. I'm just setting my timer now, and we'll try and leave some room for questions. You can always put questions in the Q&A box of the webinar, and we've got Caitlin monitoring that as well. Emmitt, thanks for spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. Before we jump in, why don't you just give us like the quick high level about you and your pedigree, and then also a little bit about Inventory Ally and how you come to this challenge.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate the opportunity to be on here and have the discussion. Inventory is a huge component of waste and pain in the hospitals. So I've been doing veterinary operations for about 20 years. I've operated a couple of hospitals. I spent over a decade at Banfield doing large scale just process improvement projects. Yeah, I have my MBA, Six Sigma black belt, so lean Six Sigma type of designs. And my entire career has just been focused on how do you eliminate the inefficiencies and the process pain points within vet med? Because at the end of the day, it's a service business. And how can we free up time and energy and focus to really treat patients and clients so that we can have a successful business? Because the long-term success of a veterinary hospital is that customers come back and refer their friends. So let's eliminate the things that get in the way of that. Inventory is a big piece of it. After Banfield, I worked at a company called SmartFlow, which is patient management flow. I then was at IDEX for 3.5 years, managing customer success for all of their software. So I've been in the space for quite a while. I know my stuff, and really what brings Inventory Ally to the forefront is we've seen a lot of constriction on where generating revenue is tough. We've seen visits flat or down in a lot of hospitals. Pricing does not have the same upside potential as it has. So revenue is more difficult. Labor is also quite difficult. It's highly competitive, but cost of goods sold, the second largest expense on the P&L, actually has a lot of capacity for improvement because of the way it's managed. That's what Inventory Ally is designed to do, is help simplify the process, optimize the inventory to really fit the P&L, fit the business, and redirect time and attention towards client patient care. So what we're going to talk through today, what I'm going to offer here is a lot of stuff that we've learned through that and that effort to try to bring that simplification to the market, um, whether it's process or tools or mindset.
Terrific. Really appreciate that. You and I have laid out some learning objectives for our time together.
Mhm.
They are here, understanding how inventory directly impacts profitability and cash flow, identify the most common inventory-related financial leaks in veterinary practices, learn how to set up appropriate inventory budgets and power levels. Totally curious about that.
Mhm.
Recognize the benefits of inventory tracking systems and staff accountability, and implementing actionable steps to improve inventory efficiency and reduce waste. No
Mhm.
surprise to people who know me and my work. I'm super interested in the sort of documentation, record keeping, bookkeeping, accountancy of it. Because if once you measure it, you can control it. And so super interested in that tie.
Mhm.
Okay, so five things we'll cover. We'll do them in about, 8 minutes each kind of thing. Inventory as a major cost center, you just mentioned the second largest cost center after labor. We'll talk about mischarges, overstocking an expired product, and how that is essentially burned cash. How inventory affects workflow and morale, and then the relationship between inventory and financial planning. So let's dig into inventory as a major cost center. You just mentioned that it's the second largest. What? Talk to me about the relationship between inventory management and, let's call it, net profit or EBITDA, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, the first thing I'll call out is that there's the major impact is on the P&L as an expense setter, but people often forget there's also a large impact to your balance sheet. And so the cost of carry of inventory can really tie up a lot of working capital or cash that could be otherwise available for other equipment, labor, other types of things. It usually sits on the shelf, and freeing that up is one key opportunity that actually ties into the P&L side. So keeping in mind that there's two impacts, but we look at them a little bit different.
Wait, let me just play that back to you. I think what I heard you say is, if you're carrying a lot of inventory, it's cash that you've laid out and it's standing on the balance sheet, and it's cash that isn't available to use elsewhere.
It isn't available to use elsewhere, but more importantly, even as we tie it back to the P&L, what we find is that when you have excess inventory, you also have excess waste. Whether it's expiration or it's theft or it's breakage, there's a lot. What we find on average is 2 to 4 percentage points of cost of goods sold. So 2 to 4% of revenue, so 2 to 4 points on COGS, can be attributed to waste that we don't see. That's really caused by excess carry and inefficient process.
Sorry, 2% of a practice's top line revenue.
2% of revenue. Mm-hmm. Which would equate to COGS going from 22% to 20% type of a thing on COGS. Yeah.
Oh, so that's like real, not like that's like real percent, not 2% of COGS, but two points.
2 points of
improvement, and that drops right to the bottom line, right?
Right to the bottom line.
And you're saying you find that in waste?
In waste. That simply by making a more efficient process and reducing how much inventory is on the shelf, we see on average 2 to 4% of revenue go straight back to the bottom line. And that is just reducing waste. That's not optimizing for price. That's not optimizing for cost, redundant formulary, any of those types of things. It's just waste because of excess. And what causes that is most of the process in hospitals generally is a very reactive process, which is, oh crap, we ran low. Let me make sure I order that, but I'm going to order enough that I don't run out again. And so we end up building excess over multiple SKUs that then compiles into space constraints, financial burden. We've got a lot of money tied up, and then it creates that opportunity for excess, just wastage, shrinkage.
You know what I did yesterday? I went to Walmart because I ran out of hand soap in the house where I got guests coming. And so I was like, well, I'm not running out of that again. So I bought two bottles. I bought two bottles, and I got home and I was like, okay. So I filled up the hand soap with half of the bottle. So I've got 1.5 bottles left. And I'm like, shit, I got to put this somewhere. So I, went into the sort of laundry room and I opened the cupboard and I had 2 bottles on the shelf.
Exactly. Thank you.
I now have 3.5 bottles of hand soap in the house.
That's right.
And Lord, please do not let me forget that next time I go to the store and be like, oh, I need hand soap.
But you're set for 2 years.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got $30 sitting on my shelf.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
It's a really
irritating.
Good example.
We often forget that the balance sheet is a key piece of the financials when we're managing our business. So I wanted to make sure we brought that up before we even dove into the P&L.
Okay, so obviously, major cost center. I can't really think about other areas of the financial of the business except for labor, right? Which is the number one expense where you've got the opportunity to improve
Right.
your P&L by 2 to 4, to your financial position by 2 to 4%, right? Like 2 to 4%, let's call it 3% on $1 million worth of revenue. That's a $30,000 improvement. You
Right.
know, that's not insignificant. 30,000 per million is not insignificant,
Not insignificant at all. No, and
right?
that again is just waste. It's not even optimizing for the other components of it. And you talked a little bit about, revenue and labor. Those don't get excluded from this conversation because when you think about revenue, if you the opposite, if you're running out of product or you're wasting it and not generating revenue off of that product, like that's a revenue impact. And on the labor side, what we find is hospitals are in this reactive state. They're spending somewhere between 4 and 8 hours a week trying to manage their inventory, which is generally labor that could be productive when it comes to revenue generation because they're actually treating clients and patients. So there's an opportunity cost of the distraction of trying to keep your inventory under control too, but it's a labor cost.
Yeah, we'll get into workflow and labor costs in a little bit for sure. Um, let's move on to talk a bit about mischarges and some common examples of revenue of inventory related revenue loss.
Sure. And just to tie up that last piece real quick, because I know there's a piece as far as financial goals, and I know we'll come back to it, but budgets is a key piece that we want to talk about because when it comes to the workflow side, we need to make sure that we're replenishing the products that we need to run our business, not artificially setting constraints to running our business. So there's other things we'll dig into. Missed charges is a great segue to that because um, there's two pieces I'll talk to on this one. One is missed charges where you're just consuming products and not accounting for them. So you're spending money to replenish products. And this may be as simple as some of the soft goods, syringes, gauze, gloves, things to that effect. They're tangible expense, and if you're not accounting for it when you're putting together the pricing of service packages, for example, you're not accounting for that. That becomes lost opportunity or kind of decreased margin performance. Um, but missed charges also makes me think and want to dig into discounts because it's still a missed charge. You still had to pay for the product, and if you give it away or you discount it inappropriately, that's also a missed charge. You didn't generate revenue off of it. And we see when we review some P&Ls, and I'm sure you see it a lot too, is the discounting line item can be significant, which is going to impact your cost of goods sold.
Thank you. It lets me get on my soapbox about, making sure like if you only know what your discounts are if you're appropriately using the AHA chart of accounts and capturing the discounts on
Absolutely.
like and like no judgment. Discount as much as you want. Discount it all. That's fine. But at
But
least
know
have
it.
the intellect. That's right. Know it, right? At least have the intellectual honesty to know what your discount, like how much you're giving away, right?
That's right.
And that way you can be a little more strategic about it.
Yep.
Um, can
Absolutely.
you talk to us a little bit about how you identify mischarges in the reconciliation process?
Yeah, one of the things that we've done at Inventory Ally, at least, is that we've really gone through and set up a process to where we can map your PIMS items, transactional items, to the order items from your suppliers, so that we can start to really understand total spend and total purchases. Because you have multiple line items and such, which adds a lot of complexity sometimes too. How are you how are you transacting inventory? And when it comes to missed charges, that's really what we're trying to understand is how much did you spend for what quantity versus how much revenue did you generate on that same quantity? And so identifying the ability, it's really kind of back to what you're saying. It makes me think of that phrase, what gets measured gets fixed or gets something. I can't remember what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
says.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
But you have to be able to measure it
yeah, yeah.
and gain
Well,
visibility. So the two kind
uh,
of things that I generally will recommend is recognizing how those things connect, but also reduce the complexity of your PIMS line items, the transactional products in your PIMS so that you have consistency, predictability, and you're not selling it 5 different ways that are essentially one because it causes a lot of confusion and you can't see it.
wait. What does that mean? Selling it 5 different ways that's actually one.
Yeah, you might have a line item sell it as a pill. You might sell it as a bottle. You might sell it as a partial. You might sell it um, as part of a package. Like there's different ways that you can set up your transactions within your PIMS because it's generally free form text. You can call it however you want, set it up however you want. But if you don't have consistency and a format to that, like the best is to say, I'm going to sell it as a bottle. And you can, or
because you
sell it
buy
as
it as a bottle.
as you buy it as a bottle, or sell it as a pill, or you sell it as a partial bottle if you're just going to sell a portion of it, right? But always in the same unit of measure, so you can tie that to what you're spending or buying it for, and now you've got clear visibility.
So consistency in the unit of measures between what you buy, what you buy and what you sell, or
As much as you
how
can,
you buy and how you sell. So
and have a
don't
strategy.
don't buy in what I guess you, but you can break them, right? You can take a six pack and sell it as a
Yeah. If you buy it
one.
as a 100 count bottle, you can sell it as zero point 0.1 of a bottle, or you could sell it as one tablet, but sell it the same way every time. Don't have five different ways you can sell it, but you're then trying to map
Understood.
back to the way that you order it, because then you're just going to lack visibility and understanding of where the opportunities exist, especially when you're looking at 800 or 1,000 different products.
Now, you talked about, I saw what you did there. You snuck in there and said, like, this is how Inventory Ally is doing it. How about people who are not on Inventory Ally? How do they manage that reconciliation process?
Yeah, whether you're working with a consultant or you're building it yourself or you're working with software, but really within your PIMS, take the time to look through how you have it set up and look for ways to consolidate that. So whether that's through the codes or the naming conventions that you want to set up there, look for ways to make that list smaller by condensing it. Because that's going to be good not only for your visibility on the financial reports and your ability to monitor this, but it's going to be easier for your team. I don't have to remember that if I'm selling it this way, I have to use this code or this transaction line. And if I'm doing it this way for these guys, I do it differently this way. It's going to also reduce confusion for them. So it's really just about taking the time to go through and create standardization within the way that you're transacting, which is going to give you easier ability to monitor your sales versus your costs. It's going to make it easier on the team. Everything just runs smoother. My co-founder Nicole Clausen is also a really good resource to be able to help you set that up even without a solution like Inventory Ally.
That's great. Okay. I just want to take a quick beat here and remind people who are watching and listening in that you can use the chat or Q&A function to ask questions along the way. We will take questions at the end. Um, uh, and also Caitlin can jump in and stop and interrupt us as we go. Okay, so we've talked about inventory as a major cost center. We talked about mischarges and reconciliation and making sure that you're staying on top of things, selling items as you buy them in the same unit of measure as you buy them, and simplifying that for the reconciliation purpose. Why don't we talk briefly then about overstocking and expired products, and maybe we can dwell here for for a little bit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, and I gave you my example of my now overstocked hand soap in my house.
Yeah.
Um, uh, let's talk about overstocking and understocking. You choose where you want to begin.
Yeah, let's continue the thread on overstocking. You had a great example of it, but there's some things to think through that cause overstock, and then there's some risks that I want to talk about when you are overstocked. A couple of things to keep in mind what causes that overstockage. One is going to be just in case ordering or reactive ordering. The idea that I ran low, somebody may have gotten upset or it just caused me stress. So let's order excess so that next time we have some left over. But then it's generally, especially if you're in a reactive process where you're waiting for the team to tell you you're short on things to build an order, you're constantly going to be in that stressed reactive space. But the reaction to order extra to prevent stockouts is one of the key drivers of that. Another one is discounted bulk ordering. So some suppliers will offer you the ability to buy in bulk at a discounted rate, which
Yeah,
sounds great. But a couple things to think about on that, and I'd love for you to give me your thoughts and correct me if you have a different opinion on it. But that's a great opportunity for them to take it off of their shelf and put it on your shelf. Now you have the
yeah.
carrying costs. they've de-risked it for themselves. It's now your risk to make sure you work through that and that you don't lose on that. It can be great if you're really good at, I know how much I'm going to go in 3 months. The payment's due in 3 months. I'm going to order enough and I'm going to solve through it. You don't have leftover. You don't have risk of expiration. You don't have risk of theft, which actually is one of the next things that I want to talk to. Excess creates opportunity for waste, which we touched on a minute ago. But what are your thoughts, Martin, when it comes to bulk ordering and those incentives?
You know, I come at this from a different passion point, right? So I come at it from the, the bookkeeping and truly understanding the costs of the costs associated with the products and services that you sell. And so and aligning them to really understand gross margin, right? And so we talk a lot about I mean, this is why we are huge advocates for accrual bookkeeping, right? So
Mm-hmm.
assuming that you can afford to tie up the cash,
Right.
go ahead and buy that 3 month supply, get your 15% rebate, but make sure you don't put it all on the P&L, right? Put it on the
Mm-hmm.
balance, put it on the balance sheet as an
Yeah.
asset, of the corporation. But again, it does assume that you've got the cash to tie it up. So that's my perspective, right? My perspective is this very sterile accountancy kind of like answer about understanding your gross profit, doing accrual
Mm-hmm.
bookkeeping, and like go ahead,
Mm-hmm.
put it on the shelf. But I find it really interesting to think this idea that excess creates waste and excess creates opportunity, like opportunity for theft, opportunity for breakage and shrinkage, and
Mm-hmm.
and opportunity for expiration. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not. I don't spend enough time thinking about that, and that's super interesting to me. Um,
Yeah,
do you
it's
have, go ahead.
like, what was your question?
I was wondering if you have any sense of like how big a problem the expert, I have no idea, right? I
Yeah.
I don't work in practice. I work in QuickBooks. Um, uh, like how big a problem is the expiration problem? Is the wastage problem? Is the shrinkage problem?
Yeah, in total, again, what we find from what I'd said before, that consistently is between 2 to 4% of revenue. It's a massive component when you put all those together. Now, the breakdown of theft versus expiration versus breakage and other types of contributions to shrinkage is hard to break out, right? There's no transactions to able to tell you what that looks like and where it's going easily, although we're working on ways to be able to create that visibility. But simply by having the excess creates the opportunity. And when we eliminate that opportunity or significantly reduce that opportunity, what we see as a result is the improvement in COGS. So we know that it's
Yeah,
there, but you don't see it. It's hidden most of the time because it's just part of
yeah.
doing business. You know.
Uh, uh, talk to us about the use of power levels
Mhm.
and setting the power levels and
Yeah.
how often should you review your power level? What is a power level?
What is the par
And
level? Yes. So par levels often referred to as min and max or reorder points. Those types of things all fall under the par level concept. And the idea here is it's really about optimizing inventory for your business. And it's if I boil it down, it's making sure you have enough and not too much of every product to be able to operate your business. That's what you're trying to identify. And that's got a couple of components to it. What is the demand on that product? How much do you use? How much do you need? Whether you're selling it or you're consuming it in the hospital, both are considered. I refer to it as consumption because you're going to consume the product and then however you use it is the outside of this. But when you think about what your demand is, the second component, the second variable in deciding what your par levels are is time of replenishment. So what we've built is the idea of there's really expensive items that you use a lot. So high cost, high volume need to turn over. A lot of folks will understand the concept of turnover. I buy it, I sell it, I buy it, I sell it. You want to do that fast for things that have the opportunity to bulk up on the shelf. So that cost to carry we talked about, but also because that they get themselves at high risk for waste. If you have excess, then expensive products or high volume products or a combination of both also are then higher risk if you carry that excess. You want them in a higher turnover. So let's say you assign parasiticides, or maybe the top 3 SKUs of your parasiticides, to a weekly replenishment. Then the par level is meant to accommodate your normal demand of that product in a weekly cycle, plus buffer stock or safety stock that's going to accommodate for normal variability of what you might sell high and low. So think standard deviations and statistical model of what you're going to consume. So you want a max, an order up to point that's going to cover your normal demand plus normal variability, and not
You
more.
just gave me you just gave me heartburn though, because you talked about standard deviations and statistics, and I don't need that. I don't need that to set my min max levels, do I?
You can use gut feel, experience. You can use transactional data from your PIMS. You can use order history from your suppliers. There's a variety of ways you can start to calculate it, but the concept of it is you want to account for your normal demand and the normal variability, and make sure you order enough to cover that. You don't have to go beyond that. That's your up to. Now, as far as the min, which is the trigger point or the reorder point, that's what when you use it that way, you want to make sure that you're triggered to reorder at a point where you're not going to run out before you get your product. So think delivery time and variability in that. So maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 1 day, maybe it's 5 days. So giving yourself that flexibility and for time for delivery and anything you might consume within that, and make sure you don't go below that point before you reorder. That's the
I'm
general
working on the
concept.
I'm working on the assumption that most stuff can be delivered to a practice within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, but now I'm going to get on one of my soapboxes.
Okay.
the They can, and a lot of suppliers offer that overnight, right? 24 hour. But we actually find in in aggregate is a lot of hospitals will place their orders on Monday. A large majority will place their orders on Monday, which means there's a whole lot of demand coming in Monday for a overnight turnaround, which means that there's a lot of pressure within this distribution system, the supply chain system, to turn that
That's
around.
interesting.
But then there's excess capacity the rest of the week. If we actually worked in more of a let's place an order once a week and let's collectively kind of spread that out, we actually increase the efficiencies or economies of scale of the entire supply chain, increases predictability as well. So that actually will then return the capability to start to reduce costs, reduce stockouts or back orders, reduce a lot of the inefficiencies of the entire supply chain if we actually start to do a more proactive, predictable process, and we can spread some of that stuff out. So instead of looking for, I could get it tomorrow, so what's the big deal? Switching to more proactive, like it's okay to take 2 days because I'm fine. I've ordered it in time. It's going to come. It actually creates some of that flexibility and the economies of scale throughout the entire supply chain that we all then get to benefit from.
It,
One of my soapboxes.
yeah, I mean, it's if I'm the CEO of, Patterson MWI or Covetrus, I'm loving what you're selling. If I'm a practice owner, I'm like, yeah, listen, uh, I
Yes.
suppose what you're saying is if we all participated and smoothed out the order points and that the distributors would have an easier time of passing on savings to us.
There's that spreading it out and not waiting and then having to have it tomorrow, or I'm going to run out. So giving yourself a little
Yeah.
bit more space and allowing a couple of days for delivery can actually start to create a lot of cost efficiencies in the supply chain, which maybe I'm idealistic, but that should free up capacity to pass some of that back to the customers. Now I don't have control over that.
It sounds a little idealistic.
A little bit, perhaps, but the other soapbox I tend to get on is that we're a service business, and success in a service business comes through leveraging partnerships. And so, who do you
Yeah,
partner with? Consistent there. That's where you start to get some of those returns kicked back to you when you can participate that way.
I didn't realize that most practices do their ordering on Mondays. I do like the idea of taking some of that pressure off and being like, okay, it's Thursday, let's get ourselves set up for next week. So that when Monday comes, you're like, all right, let's hit it. We're ready to rock and roll, and sort of
Yeah,
flip the switch a little bit and back end load.
yeah, spread that out a little bit, and Mondays can be pretty hectic as is coming in from the weekend. being
Listen,
up to
as a
anticipated.
guy who's called into vet practices for 15 plus years, I've learned never call on a Monday, never set a meeting for a Monday.
Call on a Monday. That's right. So let's
Don't
spread some of that
call.
out.
Yeah, don't call on a Monday.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let's talk about uh, workflow and morale.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, oh,
By the way, there we go.
there it is. There we go. Sorry. There we go. Let's talk about workflow and morale. Uh, I get the sense that there's sort of what I'll call an operational drag on poor inventory management. You've sort
Hmm.
of hinted at it. Can you
Hmm.
sort of make the case for why? I mean, I think like the case that like that I want to hear from you is like why crisp inventory management it results in
Yeah.
crisp operations.
Sure. Well, I'll start with saying it's one of the variables you can tackle. But when it comes to inefficient operations and workflow burden on the team, which will result in stress, burnout, those types of things, lots of different components and variables, and this is one of them. But it's often overlooked as one of those variables. So when you start to dig into it, you make it more efficient. Kind of surprising how much impact it can have on the team. Um, 'Cause, the way that you would start to recognize it, excuse me, stockouts is one of the first things. So if you're not running an efficient inventory program and you run out of product that you can't then provide care, everybody's going to recognize that. So that causes frustration and stress,
Yeah.
but it actually adds a lot of burden to the person responsible for inventory in the hospital. Because if they miss that, the team recognizes when it doesn't go well. They don't necessarily recognize when it's going well or when it and all the stuff that's going into it. But making it to where we can reduce stockouts can start to relieve some of that negative pressure and maybe even free up some capacity to positively recognize what's being done because things are working well. Um, when you have that reactive state of excess order, that's another contributor because it actually starts to fill up the hospital, especially a busy hospital. You have a lot of stuff everywhere, and that becomes hard to manage. It's in the way, and it can start to your environment feels messy, which adds to the hospital's just morale as well. And that's another one that's not intuitive necessarily, but is certainly there. Um, and then again, when we get into like a reactive state, what we often see is that we forgot we ordered that, or we've got multiple people placing orders. We create duplication. We have boxes coming in 5 days a week because we're just doing small reactive orders throughout the week versus a planned delivery. Let's put this away and now we're done. All those types of things start to contribute to quite a bit of pent up frustration or stress.
What's the best practice on team members being involved in inventory? I mean, I
Yes,
loosely get the sense that the person ordering should be different than the person receiving, should be different than
exactly.
the person paying. But can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of that. There's when we're talking about workflow, it's great to be able to delegate some components of it and just spread that out. You're going to create more appreciation from the team because they're participating in. But it also is going to make the workload easier. So what I generally like to do is have the team members help contribute to incremental cycle counts. So once a week, here's a few items. Let's take a look at those. They contribute the what's on hand, and that's separate from the inventory manager that's you're reviewing and placing the order. And so you can kind of create some separation there, but it also reduces the burden. Now, financially, it's also a really good idea to separate who's doing a physical count from who's building the order to who's paying for the invoices. So you start to create separation, and that creates accountability when it comes to the
Mm.
financial outcomes. And then you've got some multiple people in the system too that are asking questions of each other. Why does this seem off? Why is this a little bit? And it creates that opportunity to create efficiency and accountability financially as well. When it's all one person, not only is it a workload burden, but it also can kind of create the opportunity to overlook things or shuffle things.
I mean, also without casting aspersions on people, because I believe people are generally good.
Absolutely.
The few times that, the few times that we've encountered theft in the system, it's usually because it's one person who's doing the ordering, receiving, counting, and accounting for it, right? Counting and
Right.
paying for it. And so
Right.
it's sort of like stuff goes missing.
Yeah,
Um,
I've run into it a few times too. Order a little extra and put it on my own online store. Nobody's going to notice the difference. Those types of things
right.
happen. Mhm. Um, and
It
it's, so
doesn't happen often, but boy, when it happens, it feels like such a betrayal. I've
yeah,
metaphorically held the hands of a number of practice owners who have just been devastated by the betrayal. So
yeah, it's really, really hard. And we
I
talked a
don't
little
want
bit
to do
earlier.
I don't want to dwell on that, but I do want to focus on the fact that it is a best practice to
It's best practice.
separate out the
And the takeaway from that is good process reduces the opportunity for that to even present itself. So that's why you really should put best practices in place.
um what's your sense about you mentioned cycle counts. What's your
Mhm,
sense about, like, here we are, we're talking about workflow and morale. It's like, oh, we have to do an inventory count.
mhm.
That's soul crushing. Um,
Yes.
how often should we be
Yes.
counting? Uh,
Right. Well, there's a couple of things that go into that. One, just for contrast, I'll suggest, like, again, I've said this a few times, but we're a service business. But part of what that means when it comes to inventory is that we're not a retail business. We're not a manufacturing business. And I say that because in retail, you buy some shoes and then you sell those shoes, or you buy a product, you sell a product. It's one to one. It comes in, it goes out. And every time it goes out, there's a transaction for it. So managing inventory in that type of space becomes pretty easy because the math is all there.
right.
Manufacturing, I need one of these, two of those, five of these, six of these things to create this one thing. The math also works really, really well there. So predictability is high. But in the service organization, where the primary revenue generation is the sale of services, that's complemented by goods that are sold as well as goods that are used to provide that service. We don't have transactional data for everything. So it's really, really hard to manage inventory in a service type of design, right? And so we want to put the good processes in place and enable it. But because we lack that transactional data, it's best practice to replace it with cycle count data. And by cycle count, we mean count how much you have on a regular basis so that you can know what you're going through. It's what Inventory Ally does is we use cycle counts and then we augment it with transactional data to create some predictability. But by knowing how much you had, seeing how much you've ordered and how much you have left, now we have total consumption. We can see everything you've gone through, whether you sold it or not. So that's why cycle counts are really important. But as you mentioned, they're recognized as extremely burdensome. And that's because the
Yeah.
way that they're done is, in most cases, it's once a year. In best case scenarios, most of the time, it's once a quarter.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's actually optimized for the inventory that you're going through. So
Wait, what does
small
that mean?
weekly cycle counts. So what
Weekly?
weekly,
Oh
but
my
not
gosh.
everything, right?
I wish I could see
So
the faces of the people who are listening in on this. Like,
I know
you want me to you want me to
it's a
count my stuff
shift.
every week?
Items that don't have high transactional visibility is how I'll put that, right? So how do you separate the items that where you have high predictability because I buy it, I sell it? Parasiticides are a great example, right? You don't really use those in the hospital. You buy them, you sell them. Those have high transactional relationship to your total consumption. But think gauze, gloves, those types of things have no transactional value most of the time or transactional data, and it's all consumption. But then there's a whole bunch of stuff that fits in the middle that has some of both, and you don't have clear visibility. Those are the
Okay,
ones that
wait.
you're going to want to count
I want to
regularly.
play that. I want to play that back to you because it's a bit of a head trip, right?
Sure.
So my parasiticides are like the shoes in a shoe store, right? I order them in,
Yeah.
I sell them. There's sort of a one-to-one correspondence, should be really close to one-to-one correspondence between what I bought, what I sold, and then gauze and gloves and band-aids and that kind of stuff. Cotton balls. Uh, I order them. I don't sell them or barely itemize them in units. They're just kind of there. I throw on a pair of gloves, I throw them out. I pull out another pair of gloves, I throw them out. And I have no idea
Mhm.
how many patients or times or transact. I'm not charging
Right.
for those. And then you say there's stuff that's in the sort of mushy middle. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, oftentimes those are
Not to
things that
put
are
it.
going to be
Okay.
used in a service package. Right? And so we're going to do a spay or a neuter or a dental or different types of, even if it's just an exam, right? There's things that we can consume during that
Right.
process that sometimes we will itemize on an invoice, but most of the time we're going to use them and just bulk them into a service package. But they have variability. Think of things like ISO or SIVO
Right.
for anesthesia. We're going to do a line item that's going to say we used about this much, but the actual amount used is going to be variable. So a lot of
Got it.
variability that's introduced in the actual consumption of products. Um, but when you think I'm just going to talk with the white goods or the soft goods, the things that are just consumed, we find they make up over 50% of the volume of inventory in most hospitals. Not the cost, they're generally lower cost, but from a volume management, they're about 50% of the total volume that needs to be managed in the hospital. And it's usually just kind of ignored from an accounting or yeah, really from an accounting, from a financial perspective. But it's significant when it comes to operation.
So I get that they wouldn't like, so yeah, I mean, wild, right? Like 50% of the volume is white goods that you don't really count or keep track of.
Right.
From a cost perspective, what would white goods represent roughly, ballpark?
Well, generally, you're going to look at the 80-20 rule. It's going to vary by
Okay,
hospital, right? So think of about 20% of the value, but 50% of the volume.
got it.
Um, and where we were talking about that was cycle counts. And when you think about those items have no transaction data to predict demand, cycle counts is the way you start to offset that.
Right. So cycle count becomes more important on white goods because I don't have the math from the PIMS to tell me how many units I sold. The only thing I know how many times, how many I've used in what time frame is by doing cycle counts. And I guess you have to do them in shorter cycle counts in shorter time frames because otherwise you like that you use whatever 15 boxes of gloves over a 3 month period doesn't tell you how many you use a week.
Right. And if you come back to the idea we were talking about as far as waste, some of those things that are low cost that you tend to buy in a lot of bulk, they're not missed very easily. And so when you have a lot of excess, those are the ones that are actually at highest risk.
Yeah. And I suppose I could argue both sides of the financial coin on that one, and we'll use this as a good transition to the next part of the conversation. Um, uh, well, here, um, let me use that as a transition to this next part of the conversation. Better inventory equals better financial planning. Um, I could argue both sides of the coin. Do I really want to keep track of like how much gauze and gloves and cotton balls I've used, or do I just use what I need to use because it represents, 20% of my COGS? And I think that's probably, I've often said, um, it's much more fun to work in a practice that's profitable and making money than one that's not profitable and making money.
Mhm.
And so, if you're in a practice that is not profitable and making money, you absolutely should be counting the cotton balls and the gauze and the tape and frankly everything else to get yourself under financial control to really keep track of that, uh, uh, to keep track of your profitability, right? Because your profitability
Right.
is directly related to the price that you sell your goods and services for
Yeah.
versus the cost that it takes to generate those
Yeah.
goods and services. And if you don't have the cost control in place, you're in trouble.
True. But that's very much a CPA's perspective on what I'm offering. I'm trying to be nuts. The true advantage to cycle counting
I'm
is
not a
making
CPA,
sure.
so I won't
Sorry,
take that
you're
I won't take I won't take it
an
personally.
accounting or financial perspective. The true advantage of cycle counting on those products is that you're not going to run out of those products because the operational impact of not having gloves, for example, to do a procedure,
Yeah,
or
yeah, that would
not
be a
having this, not
disaster.
having that, right? So small incremental cycle counting, doing a little bit every week and then rotating through things so that you're catching things is going to reduce that overall cost of carry. It's going to reduce that space of excess waste. It's also going to help you manage, like you're ordering what you need to get through another cycle, and you're doing it intelligently, because the consequences are quite dire operationally. The financial visibility is actually a positive outcome. It's a result. It's not the purpose. It's not the point of the cycle counts. It's actually something you gain visibility to because
Oh,
the operational
Emmitt.
improvements there. I know. That's what you get when you
Profitability
put us
has
both
to
in
be
the
the
room.
purpose. Come on.
Sometimes profitability can be a pleasant outcome of operational improvements. Let me put it that way.
Oh, man. You and I are gonna have to spend more time at the bar to hash that one out. I'm
I
not sure where I
know.
fit. I'm not
I'm
sure where
looking
I sit
forward
on
to
that. I'm not sure where I
it.
sit. I'm not sure where I sit on that one.
That's funny.
Um, let's finish off. Let's finish off, and then I wanted to leave just a few minutes for questions and comments. Let's finish off around uh, well, exactly the relationship
Mm.
between inventory and profit, right? So
Yeah.
you've just made the argument that good operational efficiency leads to profit, and um, and I'm arguing that I suppose I'm arguing that the opposite side of the same coin, which is the let profit be your guide, and as a result, you should be focusing on inventory. Um, but can you talk about using inventory data to forecast demand and manage budgets?
Yes. Budgets is another soapbox of mine, because when done right, they're fantastic for managing your financial outcome and performance. When done wrong, they can restrict capability to successfully run your business if they're too constrained. One of the things I start with there is, a lot of times I'll hear hospitals say, well, my goal is to hit 20% COGS. But if you're a single doctor practice doing mixed animal in rural Kentucky, that's going to be a tough one to hit. But if you're a 5 doctor practice in downtown LA doing urgent care ER, then that's way too high, right? Your target is different. And if you start with an artificial target that's not going to fit your business, and you put a budget to that, you're actually going to force yourself to do something wrong, either excess or too constrained. So budgets is something that I generally speak to as far as identify what your consumption demands are, and make sure that you can run your business, and then look for the other variables. So let's dig into the other variables that are going to make your financial outcomes better, which is going to be reduced formulary complexity, right? So consolidate the formula, consolidate SKUs, negotiate better costs, participate in GPOs that have to help you negotiate those prices, and make sure you get good costs. Optimize your pricing, make sure you don't have leakage and waste and things that we've talked about. That's going to start to improve the outcomes without restricting your access to inventory you need to run your business. The other thing I like to reinforce is there's financial performance month to month, year to year, but the long-term success, especially when you think about an exit strategy, is really that you've created a customer base that comes to you and refers their friends. So you're growing. You have a culture where people want to work and provide that good service. You want to enable that, because long-term, that's going to be your growth, and that's going to be the
Yeah,
value of your business. Don't have short-term things that undermine that long-term value creation.
it's funny you say don't have short-term things that undermine that long-term value creation. I hear you saying stockouts as an example. Um, but I wonder if too much inventory undermines that situation also, right?
Yeah, I'll often put it this way. It's not about minimizing cost or maximizing revenue. It's about optimizing the interchange there, optimizing the opportunity for long-term success. And when I talk about long-term success, I'll put it in the form of exit strategy, because generally that's going to be a sale on the multiples of EBITDA. And so
Yes.
you don't want waste in there that's going to reduce the EBITDA performance, but you also don't want constraint in there that's going to reduce the top line performance, right? So you want to make great potential for top line revenue generation, and also flow as much as you can to the bottom line, but you want to create a long-term strategy so you maximize that EBITDA potential.
Yeah, it's funny. We talk a little bit about that when we talk about the work we do at VetBooks around the accrual accounting, right? And just
Right.
taking that inventory cost, if you're not doing accrual accounting, your inventory costs are hitting your P&L, your income statement, and decreasing your EBITDA. If you get a $50,000 improvement in EBITDA by moving the inventory onto the balance sheet, right? And your practice is valued at a multiple of EBITDA, call it 10 times EBITDA, you've just added $500,000 worth of value to your practice,
Value.
right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So
And if you put 4 points of cost of goods improvement because you eliminate all that stuff, 4 points to the bottom line. What do we say? 3 points on $1 million was $30,000. So that alone, just by improving that system,
there's another 300 grand, right? So you're
300 grand.
nearly on $1 million practice, you're nearly $1 million worth of value by uh, tightening up the inventory
$300,000.
and doing accrual bookkeeping and putting it on the balance sheet.
It's pretty fascinating how quickly that adds the value.
I never even occurred to me about the extra 2 to 4% improvement by just tightening up your inventory.
And
That's
that's just
amazing.
waste reduction. Like on top of that, if you really then go to cost reduction, price optimization, reduce formula, those other variables, you can generally add another 2 to 4 points in most hospitals, depending on where you're at and where you're starting from. But there's a lot that can be done in cost of goods sold to improve value and performance.
Okay, and it's like, we're wrapping up here. In fact, I just hit my timer. We're wrapping up here, and I want to leave time for questions and comments from the audience here. But uh, I can do this without Inventory Ally, right? It's like, I know you don't want us to do it without Inventory Ally, but it
Yeah,
can be done
absolutely.
without Inventory Ally.
Absolutely. Inventory Ally was designed to help make this more automated. It's going to reduce the time and effort. When you're doing it without Inventory Ally, absolutely you can. But it's generally when it comes to the par levels. I'm going to have to start. I'm going to sit down and go through all that stuff on a whatever increment it is, quarter, biannually, annually, and then I'm going to go through and update things. I'm going to have to adjust my par levels. I'm going to have to try to keep track of things. I'm going to have to do the work to build the orders to get it order placed, and I'm going to have to update the costs as those things change. There's a lot of effort and manual effort that goes into a good system where a lot of it can be automated. That's what Inventory Ally is designed to do, is help automate the stuff that can be automated to free you up to be more strategic and focus on client-patient revenue generation, client-patient care.
Cool.
That's the intent of it. Absolutely could be done without it.
That's great. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered a lot of ground. Um, I'm going to take us back to the, I'm going to take us back to the learning objectives. Understanding how inventory directly affects profitability and cash flow. Check. I think we checked that box. Most common inventory related financial leaks in veterinary practices. We talked a bit about shrinkage and theft and waste,
Discounts.
discounts and expiring product. Learning how to set appropriate inventory budgets and par levels. We talked a little bit about that. Recognizing the benefits of inventory tracking systems and staff accountability. We talked about your desire to have us do inventory cycle counts once a week, which is I'm not even a practice owner, and I'm like, come on, man, that feels burdensome. But I can see that if you get really into a system and the rigor and you make it part
Mhm.
of your day and maybe count half the inventory every 2 weeks.
It's not even that. If you think about 500 different SKUs in a hospital, if you broke it
Yeah,
down and said there's 50 each week, so 10% of it each week that you're going to rotate through, and some of them more frequently, but then you spread that out over 5 people. There's 10 items. It's going to take them 5 minutes to go double check, put it in, and you got your system. It doesn't have to be a burdensome process, and you'll get a lot of return on that.
I get that you'll get a lot of return on it. The rigor, go ahead. One emergency, one person calls out sick, one person goes on mat leave, and the whole thing kind of is built on a bit of a house of cards and kind of hard to
Mm. If you're
maintain.
managing it manually, yes, but that's where I'll say you should have Inventory Ally. We'll make that part very, very
Understood.
easy.
Understood. Um, and implementing actionable steps to improve inventory efficiency and reduce waste. I think we did that.
Yes.
It is 10:56 Pacific, 1:56 Eastern. We've got 4 minutes. Happy to give it back to everybody, but also totally happy to uh, uh, stick around and answer any questions that anybody may have. You can pop those in the chat, and we'll give a minute for that to happen here.
We do have one in the Q&A, Martin. If you
Oh, I don't have the Q&A.
Oh, well, I can.
I do.
Oh,
Okay.
What is your opinion on service fees for injectables to cover cost of white goods? Absolutely. Yes, there's appropriate ways to calculate service fees, and you want to account for not only the product cost, so syringe, needles, those types of things, but also the effort that goes into actually, breaking it down. So whether it's pulling it out of the syringe or pulling pills out of a bottle, service fees are absolutely appropriate. I recommend reaching out to maybe Nicole or myself. We can dig through a couple of pieces that can go into that, because getting those right is really important. The other thing you want to consider in that service fee calculation is if your doctors are paid on production, and so they're getting a percent paid back to them based on what you're doing, you want to account for that in that service fee to help with that as well.
I found the Q&A. There's a follow-up to that question. Do you add it as a separate line item?
Yes, we generally will add it as a separate line item on the invoice, so it's recognizing the product versus the administration of that product.
It's funny because this is not to counter that, because I think that's probably right. But as
There's an argument for both sides of that one, for sure.
Yeah, as a general principle, like just in general, over the course of my business life and experience, I've often talked about the bundle pricing when you sell, unbundle pricing when you're the seller, you want to bundle the pricing. When you're the buyer, you want to unbundle the pricing, right? So bundle when you sell, unbundle when you buy.
Well, it can be nice to have it bundled when it's on the invoice, so you're not opening yourself up to questions. Totally understand the customer facing side of that question.
100%.
From a management perspective, it's easier to make sure that they're separated. If you have a way to offer it one way to the customer, but still keep it separate internal of your PIM system, that would probably be ideal. But I tend to favor, maybe both of us would be biased to make sure you have data and visibility to make good decisions on, and that's one of the main drivers to my answer there.
Yeah, that's right. You got to know your actual true cost of things before you can sell them at a profit.
Right. When you separate it out as a separate line item, then the cost of the product relative to this bit, you've got that, and then you understand the offset of that additional fee.
Yeah.
Great question, Judith. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I found the Q&A. So if there are any other questions, you can drop them into the Q&A. We'll give a few seconds for that. And otherwise, we will thank everybody for their, one last one. How does Inventory Ally help margins, 2x, etc.? Billing fees. I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for the question. Struggle with the second part of it, but how does Inventory help with margins? The main thing that we're going to do on the Inventory Ally side is we map what you're selling to what you're buying across all the different ways that you can do so. So we start to offer insights to margin, so product margin management, which is true cost of goods sold, cost of product at sale, versus inventory financial P&L type of view, which is total revenue generation versus total spend. We can offer both of those. We do it in a point of relative. So product relative to other products within a category, categories relative to other categories within your business. So we can start to uncover, one of the things that we're working on too is the ability to start to overlay price elasticity, visibility, those types of things too, to help give you a sense of where you have upside potential in certain products.
And then I've got to make a plug for the AHA chart of accounts there also, because at a more macro level, not at the inventory line item level, at a more macro level, if you're using the AHA chart of accounts, you can understand the gross profit. You can understand the gross profit against 21 different revenue categories as well. So that's
an Inventory Allies mapping to that as well. So we'll be able to assist with that view, the AHA chart of accounts.
That's an entire other conversation altogether.
Which we'll take offline. Hopefully that answers your question, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you. I was reflecting on the fact that everybody's got their different passions in this industry, which is so I feel so fortunate to have friends that are passionate about so many different things. And, mine happens to be bookkeeping. I've got, friends who are passionate about wellness plans, friends that are passionate about mentoring, and you're my friend who's passionate about inventory, which, man, better you than me, but it is massively important. And I really appreciate your insights today. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Appreciate it.
And thank you to all our friends and clients who came out and spent time with us this morning. And we'll look forward to continuing the conversation offline. If anybody has any questions, comments, they can reach to us. We're easy to find on LinkedIn and off of our respective websites. And we'll look forward to continuing to support the ecosystem. Thank you all.